You're sitting on the edge of a bed in California. It's 1958. You're 42 years old. You've been in pain for 39 of those years. A deep ache in your lower back and hip that builds for days and then breaks you. You fell off a swing when you were 3. The doctors have tried everything. Nothing has worked. Tonight, you're about to try something no doctor ever suggested. You lie down. You close your eyes. You try to feel yourself back on that swing 39 years ago. The first night, nothing happens. The second night, nothing. The fifth night, nothing. Then, on a night you don't expect it, the wood is under your legs. The chains are cold in your small hands. The wind is in your hair. In the real memory, you fell backward off that swing. That fall was the injury. That injury was the pain. But this time you don't fall. You jump. Clean off the swing, onto your feet, into the grass. You run to the house. You call your mother to come watch, and you do it again and again, until landing on your feet feels more real than falling ever did. 2 days later, the pain starts to fade. Within 2 months, 39 years of pain is gone. That woman was real. Her letter was published under the initials LH in 1961 in a book called The Law and the Promise by a teacher named Neville Goddard. And what she did has a name: revision. Tonight, you're going to learn exactly how she did it and why this strange idea has fascinated people for decades. Because the deeper question isn't simply whether you can change a memory. It's this: what happens when you stop treating your past as something fixed? Neville Goddard believed that imagination was far more powerful than most people understood. He taught that the past, present, and future were not as separate as we normally assume. And when an experience continues to shape the way you think, feel, and act today, changing your relationship with that experience can change the direction of your life. He called the practice the pruning shears of revision. The metaphor is simple. Imagine your life as a tree. Your current circumstances are the branches. Your habits are the leaves. Your beliefs are the roots. And beneath many of those beliefs are memories. An experience happened. You gave that experience meaning. That meaning became a belief. That belief influenced your behavior, and eventually it became part of the identity you carry today. So Neville asked a radical question. What if you could return to the memory and change the meaning? What if, instead of replaying the event exactly as it happened, you imagined it the way you wished it had happened? Not as a way of denying history, not as a way of pretending that something didn't happen, but as a way of changing the emotional relationship you have with it. That is revision. And it begins with something incredibly simple. You remember. You replay the scene. You notice what happened. You notice what you felt. You notice the words that were spoken. And then you ask, what should have happened instead? Maybe someone should have apologized. Maybe you should have walked away. Maybe the conversation should have ended differently. Maybe the doctor should have given you good news. Maybe your father should have told you he was proud of you. Maybe the opportunity you lost should have worked out. Maybe you should have heard the words, "I'm sorry. I believe in you. You did it. Everything is going to be okay." The important thing is specificity. Don't simply say, "I wish my life were better." Give your imagination an ending. Give it a scene. Give it words. Give it emotion. Then enter the scene. This is where most people misunderstand the practice. They watch themselves from the outside. They imagine themselves like they're watching a movie. But Neville emphasized something different. Experience the scene from inside yourself. See what you would see. Hear what you would hear. Feel what you would feel. If someone is shaking your hand, feel the hand. If someone is hugging you, feel the embrace. If you're walking through your childhood home, hear the floor beneath your feet. If someone is congratulating you, hear their voice. Don't just observe the new reality. Live inside it. Because the goal isn't to create a beautiful movie. The goal is to create an experience that feels natural. And that brings us back to LH. She didn't simply tell herself, "I didn't fall." She went back into the experience. She felt the swing. She felt the chains. She felt the wind. And then she changed the ending. Instead of falling backward, she jumped forward. She landed on her feet. She ran home. She repeated the scene until the new ending became vivid enough to compete with the old one. And according to her account, the physical pain eventually disappeared. Now here's where the story becomes even more interesting. Because around the same broad era, physicists were asking questions about something completely different. Can the act of observation affect what we say happened? Enter John Archibald Wheeler. Wheeler was one of the most influential physicists of the 20th century. He helped popularize the term black hole, and he became fascinated by one of the strangest implications of quantum mechanics. The famous double-slit experiment had already demonstrated something bizarre. Particles such as photons can behave like particles or like waves, depending on how they're measured. Wheeler took that idea and pushed it further. He proposed what's known as the delayed choice experiment. The basic idea was astonishing. Imagine a photon traveling toward an experimental setup. There are different possible paths it can take. But instead of deciding how to measure it before the photon enters the setup, what if you wait? What if you make the measurement decision after the photon has already entered? Quantum mechanics suggested that the answer could depend on the measurement arrangement chosen later. Experiments based on Wheeler's proposal were eventually carried out, and they produced results that were deeply counterintuitive. But we need to be careful here. This does not prove that humans can rewrite personal memories. It does not prove that imagination changes the past. And it certainly does not prove Neville Goddard's manifestation teachings through quantum physics. That's an important distinction. Quantum mechanics is not a magic wand for manifestation. The delayed choice experiment deals with quantum measurement and the description of physical systems. It doesn't demonstrate that imagining a different childhood event causes history to literally change, but it does reveal something profound about reality. At the quantum level, our everyday assumptions about time, measurement, and what something was can become extremely strange. And that is exactly why Wheeler's ideas became so fascinating. Because they force us to question something we normally take for granted. Is reality always as simple as the story we tell about it? Neville approached that question from a completely different direction. He wasn't working in a physics laboratory. He was working with imagination. And his claim was psychological, experiential, and spiritual. Change the internal story, and you change the person who lives in the present. That distinction matters. Because even if revision doesn't literally alter historical events, it can absolutely alter something that is very real, the meaning you carry forward. Think about it. Two people can experience the same event and remember it differently. One person remembers failure, another remembers a lesson, one remembers rejection, another remembers redirection, one remembers humiliation, another remembers the moment they discovered their strength. The event may be identical, but the meaning is different. And meaning changes behavior. Behavior changes habits. Habits change identity, and identity changes the future. That's where revision becomes practical. Let's look at another story from Neville's teachings. A woman had reportedly been involved in a serious car accident. Her eye had been badly affected. Doctors expected the damage to remain. But night after night, before falling asleep, she imagined the accident differently. She didn't replay the crash as it had happened. She imagined the brakes working. She imagined the car avoiding the collision. She imagined the accident ending safely. She repeated that corrected version until it became vivid. According to the account, she eventually experienced a dream in which the revised version completed itself. She later reported improvement in her condition. Again, we should separate the story from medical evidence. Anecdotes cannot establish that imagination alone heals physical injuries. Medical conditions need appropriate professional care, but the psychological principle behind the story is worth examining. Because the brain is constantly using imagination. Every time you worry about tomorrow, you're imagining. Every time you replay an argument, you're imagining. Every time you predict failure, you're imagining. Every time you lie awake thinking about what someone said 3 years ago, you're revisiting an internal scene. The question isn't whether you're using imagination. The question is, what are you using it for? Now consider another story. A man named F.B. owned land he couldn't sell. His agent wrote back with a discouraging message. The market was slow. Nothing was moving. Most people would have read the letter and accepted it as reality. But F.B. did something different. He mentally rewrote the ending. He imagined the land sold. He imagined the buyer. He imagined the handshake. He imagined the agent saying, "It was a pleasure doing business with you." He repeated the scene until it felt ordinary. According to Neville's account, just a few days later, the agent contacted him with a buyer. The land sold, and the words the agent used were remarkably similar to the words FB had imagined. Coincidence? Possibly. Selective memory? Also possible. Or perhaps the mental rehearsal changed the man's behavior in ways he wasn't consciously aware of. We can't know from the anecdote alone, but here's what we can know. When you repeatedly imagine an outcome, you begin to become familiar with it, and familiarity can change how you act. You speak differently. You notice different opportunities. You take different actions. You become less intimidated by the possibility. And sometimes the thing that felt impossible begins to feel normal. There is another story Neville told involving his own family. A troubling medical diagnosis had reportedly been given to a child in his extended family. The situation appeared serious, but Neville imagined receiving completely different news. Instead of rehearsing the diagnosis, he imagined hearing that the second test was clear. He held on to that scene. According to his account, further testing produced a different result. Again, we should not turn an anecdote into medical advice. Medical diagnoses require qualified doctors, testing, and treatment. But the story illustrates Neville's central principle. Don't mentally rehearse the outcome you fear. Instead, choose the outcome you want to inhabit. And this brings us to the method. 4 steps, simple enough to remember, powerful enough to practice every night. Step 1, replay. Choose one event. Don't choose the most traumatic experience of your entire life. Start small. Maybe someone embarrassed you. Maybe a conversation went badly. Maybe you missed an opportunity. Maybe someone rejected you. Maybe you made a mistake. Replay it once, calmly. Don't fight it. Don't judge yourself. Just observe what happened. Step 2, rewrite. Now ask what should have happened instead. Be specific. Maybe the person apologized. Maybe you answered confidently. Maybe you received the opportunity. Maybe the conversation ended peacefully. Maybe you heard the exact words you needed to hear. Create the new ending. Step 3, enter now. Stop watching yourself from the outside. Enter the scene. See through your own eyes, hear the voices, feel the environment, feel your body. Experience the corrected ending as if you're actually there. The goal is not to force yourself to believe something impossible. The goal is to make the scene emotionally familiar. Step 4, fall asleep there. This was one of Neville's most important ideas. The moments before sleep are different from ordinary waking consciousness. Your attention becomes quieter. Your body relaxes. Your mind becomes less analytical. And Neville believed this state was especially receptive to imagination. So instead of falling asleep replaying tomorrow's problems, return to your revised scene. Hear the words. Feel the emotion. Let the scene become ordinary. And then fall asleep. Don't force it. Don't strain. Don't desperately ask, did it work? Simply return to the scene again and again and again. Because repetition is what makes a mental experience familiar, and familiarity changes what feels possible. Now, most people fail at revision for 3 reasons. The first is that they decorate the old memory instead of replacing the ending. They replay the painful scene exactly as it happened and then say, but everything is okay now. That's not revision. That's commentary. Revision means changing the scene itself. The second mistake is watching from outside. You imagine yourself sitting somewhere watching another version of you experience the event. Instead, enter your own body. Look through your own eyes. Hear what you would hear. Feel what you would feel. The third mistake is impatience. You do it once, you wake up the next morning, nothing has changed. So you conclude, this doesn't work. But think about how long you've rehearsed the old story. Maybe you've replayed the same embarrassment for 10 years. Maybe you've told the same story about yourself 100 times. Maybe you've spent decades saying, this is just who I am. And then you expect one night of imagination to erase all of that. Your mind doesn't work like a light switch. Repetition matters. But there's another important point. You don't need to obsess over revision all day. You don't need to constantly check reality. You don't need to force yourself to believe something. You simply practice the new scene until it becomes natural, and then you live your life. Because the real power of revision may not be that the historical event magically changes. The real power may be that you change. The person who once felt rejected may stop expecting rejection. The person who believed they were powerless may begin acting with confidence. The person who constantly rehearsed failure may start rehearsing success. The person who carried an old identity may finally put it down. And when identity changes, behavior changes. When behavior changes, circumstances can change. That's a very different claim from saying imagination can violate the laws of physics. It's a claim about the human mind. And that claim is much easier to defend. Your memories influence your emotions. Your emotions influence your decisions. Your decisions influence your actions. And your actions influence your life. So if you change the way you relate to your memories, you can change the way you behave today. That alone is powerful. Think about a memory you've been carrying for years. Someone said something to you. Maybe they didn't even remember saying it, but you did. And every time you remember it, you hear the same sentence. Maybe it became part of your identity. You're not good enough. You'll never succeed. You're too sensitive. You always mess things up. Maybe you heard those words so many times that eventually you started saying them to yourself. Now imagine revising the scene. Not because the historical words never existed, but because they no longer get to define you. Imagine yourself hearing something different. I believe in you. You can do this. You're capable. I'm proud of you. And then imagine carrying that version of yourself into tomorrow. That's where revision becomes more than a technique. It becomes a way of taking ownership of your inner world. You cannot control everything that happened to you. You cannot travel backward in time and physically change every event. But you can decide what those events mean now. You can decide which stories deserve to keep running. You can decide which identities you are finished carrying. And you can choose what you rehearse before you fall asleep tonight. So here's your practice. Pick one scene, just one. Replay it honestly. Then change the ending. Make it specific. Make it simple. Enter the scene. See through your own eyes. Hear the words. Feel the moment. And when it feels natural, let yourself fall asleep there. Don't force it. Don't chase signs. Don't wake up tomorrow and immediately demand proof. Just carry the new feeling into your day, because the past may be recorded in history, but the meaning you give it is still alive inside you. And that meaning can change. Maybe you can't change everything that happened, but you can change what happens next. You can stop rehearsing the version of yourself that was created by yesterday and begin rehearsing the person you're becoming. That's the deeper message behind Neville Goddard's idea of revision. Not that you should deny reality, not that you should ignore medical advice, financial facts, or the consequences of real events, but that you should never underestimate the power of the story you repeatedly tell yourself, because eventually the story becomes familiar, the familiar becomes believable, the believable influences behavior, and behavior shapes your life. So tonight, before you sleep, ask yourself one question. If I could replay one scene from my life and give it a different ending, what would I change? Choose the scene. Change the ending. Feel it. Repeat it. And then let it go. The past you're carrying may have been written by an event, but the story you carry forward is still being written. And perhaps the most important editor in that story is you. If this video gave you a new way to look at your past, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you enjoy powerful stories, timeless ideas, psychology, imagination, and lessons that can change the way you see yourself and your reality, subscribe to Stories and Quotes B. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story, because sometimes one idea at the right moment can change the entire way you see your life. Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep questioning the stories you tell yourself. This is Stories and Quotes B. See you in the next one.